I'm having a cup of tea.
Tea. Yeah, cup of tea.
Hi, Hotep, greetings everyone.
Greetings, Jane.
Greetings.
Jean.
How's everyone doing? Everyone's good?
Surviving.
I'm good. I'm good.
Hi,
I'm
Brother
good, I'm
Toyin,
good,
how
I'm
you
good, I'm
doing?
Not too bad. Surviving is a good one.
Yeah. I think we all are in this funny time we're in.
Yeah, there's a lot of
With
challenge.
contradictions every day.
Yeah, and I had some sad news as well today. I don't know if anybody knows Lady Leo, Sister Jan.
Yeah.
Yeah, they passed today.
She passed. I knew she was in hospital.
Yeah.
I heard she was in hospital, but I didn't know how she was because obviously we're not really able to visit people. The visits are restricted to a certain degree, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really sad. That's really sad because she's one of my favorite DJs.
She's a fantastic person as well.
Oh,
yeah.
my God.
Absolutely fantastic person. And I have to say, I was totally gutted. Totally gutted.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few who have transitioned, this year, hasn't there, that we know of. There's just been a lot. And it's sad. It really is sad. It just seems strange that there's just been so many this past few. Well, where are we now? September now.
Yeah.
It's been so many
in a few months.
Yeah.
But
absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. I heard she was in hospital, but I didn't realise how the seriousness of it. Obviously, much more than I thought.
I can't help thinking that these
to the Garvey Village's Unlock the Chains and Keep Well, where we give you the remedies and keys for us to continue. I can see a telephone. Am I as a telephone or somebody else is a telephone there? So somebody on the phone. If I put the mute on that, then hopefully that will change the screen. So welcome everyone. This is the 24th episode, you could say, session of the Garvey Village's Unlock the Chains and Keep Well, where we give you the remedies and keys of day-to-day existence, carrying on, survival, proceeding forward to what is an unprecedented future, which we're not too sure of. But as long as we have our minds in front of us and our, our vision, then we can I've been thrown. We can move forward in a more directive manner. Okay, so with that, I give thanks to our ancestors who have been taken from the shores of our homes and taken and jotted all over the world. So I give thanks for their tenacity. I give thanks for the fact that they had the strength to dig deep down and get the strength to carry on and to survive, because if it wasn't about their survival, we wouldn't be here now. So for them, our ancestors, I say ashe and thank you. I also want to thank the ancestors, our leaders, the Great Honourable Marcus Messiah Garvey, which I'll always name, and other leaders who we do know, names that we know very well, and other leaders whose names that we don't know, and leaders whose names we'll never know. I give thanks for them opening the way and letting us know that we don't have to be putting up with all the nonsense that they throw at us, that we can get up, we can rise up, we can do as we do for our own people. I give thanks to those ancestors for them opening the path and paving the way. Ashe. I also give thanks to my ancestors whose heads and shoulders I'm standing upon, and I give thanks to your ancestors whose heads and shoulders you're standing upon, your lineage, the ancestors who's made you the person who you are today, the good ancestors who we rely on to guide us and to help us. And we've got to also remember that they're there waiting for us to give them guidance as well. So we have to ask them for help, ask them for guidance, and let their answers be as clear as this water, and let our minds be open so that we can receive those answers, so that we can move forward. Ashe. And I'll pour a bit of libation for Sister Jan, who, as I said, who's passed today, for her works, bringing people together, especially children, for especially with the films, bringing the films and letting children know their history via the films. So Sister Jan, who's just passed on to the ancestors today, I give thanks for your works. I say Ashe. I also give thanks to the Most High, the creator of all things, great and small, the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, the animals, and us as a people. And giving us, as I say, hope or trust that we will get through all of this. Ashe. And with that, I declare the Garvey Village Unlock the Chains, Remedies and Keys, chapter, should I say 24, now open. So Royston, is there anything that you would like to say before we go into our first presentation?
No, all is good. Welcome everyone. I think we're getting familiar with
welcome
Zoom process, and yeah, so that's all I'd say. Welcome. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our brother Toyin, and this is about Pan-Africanism. So is it going to be a question of Royston giving questions and Toyin giving answers?
I'll set it.
Okay, yeah. All right then. So I'll also introduce Royston John.
No, you don't have to introduce me. Just introduce Toyin.
Okay.
Just introduce Toyin.
The screen is now yours. Toyin, welcome.
Greetings and thank you for the welcome again.
So yeah, greetings and welcome, Brother Toyin. Our journey and experience go back many, many years. So delighted to be on a platform again alongside you. So thank you. So people, we're going to work on a question and answer basis with Brother Toyin. I'll kick off the first few questions, but then I want you to be able to identify and come in with questions that we can put to Brother Toyin and manage the evening that way. And powerful brother with a powerful mind that, you know, every time I'm in a session with him, he brings something that, what I'd call left field. You know, people are going in that direction and he'd go, you know, from the side, he'd come and say, hey, what about this? And everybody has to stop and just turn, because what comes out is just so on point, you know, so visionary.
Very kind of you.
It's true, it's true. So, Brother Toyin, you describe yourself as a Pan-Africanist. What is that? What does that mean?
Wow. It simply is just it's the word that we use that comes from our ancestors, our greats, who link the struggle to connect our family across this globe, across many continents, in a cultural, spiritual, political, unified vision for the empowerment of all our people. It comes in many different forms. Some people see it as Black nationalism. Some people see, you know, as as just community activism. But wherever people are, African people are, whether they recognize or self-identify as Africans or not, as a Pan-Africanist, my interests are actually in making sure that they're okay, that they're safe, and that we are functioning as a family.
Mm-hmm. So if I can split hairs, how does that different from being an African? You know, what's the difference between an African and a Pan-Africanist? Is it about the activity? Is it about the engagement? Is it about what we do?
Well, I mean, I'm not a historian, but I mean, Pan-Africanism has been around from millennia. You know, we didn't always define it using the term Pan-Africanism. And I just adopt that name because that's the one that we're familiar with. But even in the days of Ma'afa, from the moment that the first Africans said that I'm resisting these crimes of Europeans trying to enslave me, when we were working in the Middle Passage together, using different languages and fighting resistance and resisting in different ways, when we're sharing arms on the motherland, that's all expressions of Pan-Africanism. It's not just about being an African with direct lineage to the continent. It's many of us have actually been disconnected, either culturally, physically, increasingly so spiritually, through an abuse of much of our cultural assets. So it's kind of like just that understanding that we are family. That's the core. For me, that's one of the basis. I'm engaged in the political activities of Pan-Africanism, but you have musicians who engage in Pan-Africanism. You have poets, you have, you know, filmmakers, you have, you know, there's many expressions of Pan-Africanism. So you know, my version is one, or the version that I assign to in the work that I do is that's political and spiritually centered.
Okay, thank you. So if someone has desires to step into the activity or become more involved, do you have a guide map? Do you have, you know, supposing I say, I don't know, a 19 or 20-year-old say, I want to stand and step into that realm of being there to support my people, to grow my people. Do you have a guide map? Any key points or step you would offer them?
I think the first function is that maxim of knowing thyself. So for any young person or elder who's looking to engage with Pan-Africanism, it's first to recognize that you're an African. That's the first step. Who are you? Because you can't identify family if you don't actually know who you are. So recognize that and recognize it beyond the language that we're using. So many Africans will use different terminologies. We might call ourselves, you know, I don't know. I'm just thinking in a minute, because I don't use those terms. We call ourselves Black people. We call ourselves people of color. We call ourselves Nubians. We call ourselves Alcabans. Look beyond the language. Do you see yourself as someone connected to the motherland? Do you recognize that your ancestry is from Africa? Not being of African descent, which is different. Being of African descent, the whole world is of African descent. Africa is the motherland. It's a cradle of civilization. So even the European can claim to be of African descent, and technically, you know, there's a basis of that. You know, whether they're mutated on their migrations is another issue. That's another story. You know, that's not my area of specialism. But when we talk about someone having ancestry of that, who's African and being of African heritage, we tend to refer to people learning about the journey that got them to where they are. Then after you recognize and you know yourself, once you know who you are, you have a sense of who you are, and you can start that journey, then it's using history. It's looking at our scholars. It's looking at our activists, our historians. It's looking at, there's a wealth of activity in every sector we have been giants in. I mean, Western knowledge and civilization likes to limit us to sports, to entertainment, to criminality, and that's our narrative in the Western field. But we are involved in every aspect of life, from science, you know, from classical music, because when we use the word classical music, we often render it in European terms. But of course, music from the kora, from the British, the African drums, these are all forms of classical music. They're just being moved out of definitions of what classical music is. So find where your specialism is, and study it, and then work out what your purpose is. This is so key. find your purpose, find it in that strength which the ancestors has gifted you, and then follow it. I think it's the great Pan-Africanist Amilcar Cabral. He makes a statement. It's either himself or Frantz Fanon. They make a statement about when we either realize our mission or we betray it. We have to be careful. We have to know what we're doing. Find out what your purpose is and serve it. That's really the guidance steps for any Pan-Africanist.
Right. Thank you. And you've touched on it already, that you are very much interested in the political realm. Do you want to say a bit more about that? What does that entail?
Well, I describe myself as a community educator. That's what I've been doing with the Legality organization for a couple of decades now. And I'm a scholar activist. And education is a very political tool. You know, we often don't conceive it as that way, but even just watching what's happening in the UK with the recent exams, we've seen the blatant exposure of the myth of meritocracy, where young people's exam grades were given to them based not on their merit and the quality of their work, but based on the school's history and where they lived. Yeah. So we see the system of miseducation in the school, which is really more about program, it's more about indoctrination, it's more about training, as opposed to being what education is really about, which is realizing, you know, the spirit, realizing the potential within each to actually achieve greatness inside their world, to realize their visions and dreams. So education for me is a very political instrument. It's a very political tool. And it means that sometimes the work that I do takes me on different avenues, because education underpins virtually everything we do. I can be involved in dealing with helping young people understand the dictates of Section 60 orders when it comes to stop and search. Yes. People might not link education to police brutality on the streets of the UK, but they are linked. I might talk about the miseducation that happens in the schooling system. I might have to address inequalities in the housing system and read in local authority legislations. I'm currently looking at museums and street names which perpetrate spiritual violence on African people as we walk in the public realm in the UK. Right. People don't understand that the statues and names of streets are continuously perpetuating white supremacist ideals and actually asserting an idea of African inferiority by promoting European slavers as some kind of champions of human rights. Yes, so education is not just about going to school, learning how to do quadratic fractions, reading that ABC, and then getting a grade and a tick box. Education often happens, the best education often happens outside the education system, outside the universities. So when you say, how do I work politically? For me, it's actually making people understand that education in itself leads to self-empowerment, and any self-empowerment that is based on liberatory themes is political, and there will always be people opposing you because of that. So what I'm hearing is essentially you are engaged in opening the awareness of our people, you know, to make everyone more aware of their surroundings and how it impacts on us as a people. Is that a fair? Yeah, and that we have to own our own education. We can be self-determined, that we need to link with like-minded people and actually start taking ownership of this process so that we can actually empower ourselves. What brings you the greatest joy in the work that you do? I know you as always busy. What brings you the greatest joy? Every time something I do liberates an African in any way. So whether I'm talking to a group of young people and I see that light bulb moment when they see something and they get it and they understand it. When a police officer knows he's going to lose his job because I've exposed something in their statement, which is a lie. When a group of people come together to actually form a new organization or work on and embolden the legacy of another one. It's I think for me, I mean, obviously, you know, being a father, being a husband, being a brother, my family commitments are very important to me. Yeah. But my community is equally as important to me. And so anything that makes the world a better place, I think Martin's about the beautification of the world. anything that makes the world a bit better than when I came in, and leaves something so that when I become an ancestor, that our children inherit something that's better than when we came in, because they didn't ask to be birthed in the way that most people see it. That makes me a little happier.
Right. I love that. Anything that makes the world a better place than when I came in. That's really, brings joy to my heart. What's your greatest challenge around trying to do and trying to achieve this, apart from the system? Because we know the system is a perpetual challenge. What's the greatest challenge to you?
I don't like to sound negative, so I'm going to try to frame this in a way. I'm always, my inspiration, I'm always truthful. I will not tell a lie.
Sure.
So I think the biggest challenge that I have is in us as a people not always understanding how powerful we are.
Yeah.
And not understanding the essential nature of things like confidence, of imagination, of creativity, of vision. One of the biggest tricks that our oppressors have done and continue to do is perpetuate this illusion that they are impervious to harm, that they don't make mistakes, that they're invincible. Their power doesn't come from the nuclear weapons which they have. That's the threats, that's the monopoly on violence they have. Their power comes from what we call the soft power, Hollywood. It comes from poetry. It comes from the 100 million versions of Shakespeare stories, of the Roman narratives that teach the world that they are always going to be in a position of supremacy. And we believe in it. That's the problem. You see, I expect every culture, every people to express themselves in a way that flatters them. Not to be dishonest in the way that many Western nations and Europeans often tend to be. But I expect that people are going to flatter their religions, their culture, their art. It's going to favor them. That's a human trait, a human weakness.
Yes.
The problem I see is that because of our history, because of the Ma'afa, because of the way we have been victimized and brutalized, not just physically, but also spiritually, we often conceive of Western ideas as always being dominant. And I know that's not true. My father taught me one thing when he was in this realm, that nothing is impossible. Just some things are more difficult to achieve than others. And I believed him. And it's because of my belief in him as a young man that I've been able to achieve so much in my life that I am quite proud of. Nothing is impossible. You just have to work hard. You just have to have the vision, and then you manifest it. And so I get upset when I'm talking to other Africans who want change, but they start from the premise that nothing will ever change. You'll hear it. There is no such thing as the Black community. Nothing will ever change. It's always been like this. And we have to often go all the way back then. And I had to talk about, well, hold on. We are no longer in physical chains. We might be economically in bondage. We might be politically oppressed, but our ancestors have fought continuously, and we're making progress. We're constantly making progress, and we're making revolutionary progress. And so the idea that, the system will always be in power is just completely untrue. The system that, that we're trying not to talk about is actually waning in power. And so we have to recognize that we can seize the moment. And so that's the frustration for me. It's like, I've got a rule now, actually. I tend not to have that discussion with elders anymore, because I've reached a point in my life where I feel that I will not keep repeating that same narrative of don't be self-defeating. Have vision, have courage, have faith, have belief. But I will engage in this discussion a million times with our young people, because of course that is our responsibility as elders.
Yes, as you're speaking, one of those quotes that come to mind that, Churchill said that history will always remember me favorably because I'm going to write it myself. Yeah.
I haven't heard that quote, but that sounds like a plagiarizing version of The Hunt Always Glorious, the story.
Absolutely. And so the place of us getting to that place where we tell our story, where we walk our talk and talk our walk and spread our vision and spread our love, and how can we accelerate that? How can we,
Look, we are. I mean, the first thing we have to do is recognize that entertainment, as it's called, isn't just a passive, neutral political act. We tell our stories, our narratives. They are phenomenal cultural instruments. They're weapons.
Yes.
And
the
first act of Pan-Africanism is actually to create the dream of what that the world should be, what it can be. And so, I mean, we recently had the passing of Chadman Bosman.
Yes.
Great actor, great human being, great African. And as much as I have challenges with the renditions, the political story underpinning the Black Panther film, there's lots of things in there that are atrocious. They align with the elevation of President Obama as our savior. The romantic image, the idea of African empowerment was very powerful and very useful. And I appreciate that. And I respect that and I applaud that. And that's a good example, or a example. There are far better examples in the writings of, I said, Aikwe Amar, Chinua Achebe, Usman Sembene as a filmmaker, but there's many other expressions of how the world should be and can be, written in poetry, in songs, that we can draw on. And you see, when we create and we realize this image of what we want, then we can work towards it. We can manifest it. We need to speak it first. We need to utter it. Often we're afraid to talk about African empowerment. I mean, we have been socialized to be frightened to talk about so-called whiteness.
Yes.
It's almost like a taboo. The people who are oppressing us are Europeans, but we dare not utter their name. Well, we need to utter the name. We need to utter the world that we want. And when we start doing this, it accelerates our progress. I've always had this funny, well, I find it funny. There's a funny but a tragic thought in my mind. I think about Guy Fawkes night, the fireworks night. I never celebrate fireworks night. I find it quite abhorrent that people would spiritually think it's okay to walk around and burning effigy of the human being to suppress the idea of people wanting to liberate themselves. I think there's morally and spiritually sick about that. But that's what happens in this country. They burn this effigy of the guy and demonize kind of like one of their potential liberators from this class system. And I often think to myself, what if he was successful? What if, and I'm not promoting terrorism.
Sure.
What if he was successful and he had burnt down Parliament and that whole rotten system that is still in place now, the same rotten system that was involved in Ma'afa, that continues to perpetuate the crimes and has never been revolutionized, was gone. What would the people do? And I always come to the sad conclusion that unless we have conceived, drawn, written, expressed an alternative system, people inherently, human beings, and it's a real shameless, tend to replicate what they know.
Yes.
They reproduce exactly the same system.
Yes.
Was oppressing them. So the work isn't just to do activism to change things. That's part of the work. The other part of the work is actually, what do you want to change it to? And we have to articulate that with courage. We have to be brave about this. We have to be creative about this. And that's part of the role of education.
Okay, so I've got some more questions to ask you, but I want to throw it open to anyone else who may have a question, to put to you, Brother Toyin. And so while that person is, whoever it is lining himself up to ask, do you have a recommended book list of reading that would guide our young, our middle-aged, our elder into claiming themselves?
I asked that recently on a radio interview. My book list is always evolving. What I'll do, because I know I sent them a list from a book I published. I wrote a book when I was on my right, one of my rites of passage in Senegal.
Mm-hmm.
A book called Equelle, and in it I listed, I think it was around 10 or 15 books that helped shape me to be the person I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't have some of the latest titles that I have read, and there's been some fantastic new titles. I'm not talking about anti-racist books.
Sure.
Anti-racism is very different from Pan-Africanism.
Sure.
So what I'll do, I'll try and share that, but they do include books like John Henrik Clarke, Africans at the Crossroad. They include Enemies at the Gates by oh God, my name.
That's fine. We've got the title.
It's gone. I mean, there's so many.
Yes.
I mean, what I'll do, I'll share them before I leave. You know, sort of like in the chat as well. But there's
That'd be fantastic.
But it has my readings are crafted for me. You know, when I read Malcolm's biography, that was at a time when I needed to read it. It was on a time when I was my first journey back to Nigeria, and it had a profound impact on me. So it's everyone has different readings at different times.
Sure. Thank you. Sister Chineri's got a question she wants to put to you.
Hey, greetings, Toyin.
Greetings, Sister Chineri. Good to hear your lovely voice.
Good to see you. I'm very excited. Yeah, I'm loving what you're saying. It's very affirming and it is very positive. I know you and I have had many discussions. I would like to ask you, I'm a storyteller. I'm a promoter of the oral traditions. I'd like to ask you where you think the oral traditions can be utilized in order to promote the idea of visualizing the future that we wish to step into, that we wish to create.
Did you say where they can be used?
How, where and how?
Well, I think use as one of our premier griots in this country, already practice and deliver one of the most important spaces, which is community spaces, spaces which bring us together in an uncompromising manner and form, so that we elevate ourselves and we share our stories and learn from that. But the next step from that is actually, I think the best place should be in our homes, not in the schools, not in public domains where there are restrictions on the languages that we can use, the messages that we give, but in homes where we can eat, break bread, discuss, reason without fear of censure. Because many of the stories that we talk about, people feel threatened by them. And so the first thing to do is be able to talk without that feeling of censure, that feeling of having to self-moderate. Often we self-moderate. So if we're talking in a public space, for example, the moment a non-African will walk into the space, you'll find that some of us will become uncomfortable with speaking our truths. And some of us do it out of courtesy, but a lot of us do it out of fear of whiteness, fear of the repercussions, fear, if we feel intimidated. And that's part of our journey. We have to learn how to overcome that. And the only way to learn how to overcome that is through informal education. It means learning in spaces where we feel safe to make mistakes, because we all make mistakes. And that's a beautiful thing, because it means if we're making mistakes, we're pushing boundaries, and then we have an opportunity to learn from those mistakes. But outside our homes, we live in a culture where making mistakes is seen as a weakness, where you can be penalized, you can lose your job, you can lose your credibility, your reputation can be tarnished. And I think that when we're talking honestly about shaping our future, crafting our future, learning from the mistakes of our future. I mean, I'm a great lover of the military ability of Shaka the Zulu King, but I don't like the fact that the way he used force to bring nations together. So we need to be able to have safe discussions about these concepts. What's good, what's bad? Were the Maroons a force of good in that they freed African people? But what about, how do we deal with the fact that they worked with the British and returned enslaved Africans? You know what I mean? So we need to have those in safe spaces. And those are uncomfortable decisions, but I'm as a guiding line for me, I have this rule that I don't do wrong and strong. And if I'm in public, and there are non-Africans who start to attack me, I know that I tend to fall onto the strong side of things, because then I need to provide a persona. I'm representing the community, and I cannot allow us to take blows. I'm not a pacifist. I don't turn the other cheek. So that's why I say we start in homes, in safe community spaces. And then once we've crafted the narratives that are suitable for public dissemination, we then put them in films, in comics, in animations. We put them everywhere. I hope that's, I haven't gone into too much detail. I'm a bit nerdy like that.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. So I hear you. So we start at home. We have honest conversations with our family and our children and our friends. And then, but I would say before going out into the public that we go into the public, but still maybe a melanin-rich only space, and develop that conversation in the community before actually going out further. So yeah, I agree with all that you say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, nothing beats the benefit and power of the dinner table for us as a family to sit together, break bread together, and so much more develops from that place. Anyone else has got a question for Brother Toyin? Silence. Okay, so you talked earlier about the statues and the names of places that impact on us. I know, as somebody who worked extensively in Bristol, you know, I was always challenged about White Lady Road and Black Boy Hill, you know, as a very symbolic statement. And you know, someone was telling me about, I didn't see it, but an incident with a policeman was addressing a 72-year-old black man as boy.
Yeah.
You know, so can you say a bit more about that? How that the visualization, the labeling, the glorifying of bad and evil, you know, how that is flipped and turned into good, that has us believe that we should be in awe of, you know, the people with their foot on our necks.
Well, this is how miseducation works. It's a powerful force. It could be used, it's like a knife. It could be used for good or it could be used for evil. And we see education used not to elevate people, but to oppress people. And we don't recognize often that education comes in many forms. And this is why I talk about culture so much. This is why I talk about spirituality so much. Because when you are seeing these names, you're seeing these statues, there's been a decision that has been made to erect them. They're not there by accident. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a group, a committee that knows the relevance of these symbols. They know that they commit cultural violence, symbolic violence. There's a whole, there's a philosophy about symbolic violence. It's not me talking about a conspiracy theory. And they continue to perpetrate it. Mm-hmm. So when I do this work, I do it with the realization that it's actually an important part of liberation work. You see, often, especially with this whole recent Black Lives Matter furore that's been happening, where people are being conscientized to what's been happening to our family in America, many people will think, well, hold on, why are we focusing on statues? We're talking about structural violence. You know, we're talking about kind of like what's happening in the police forces. It's like, this work is a distraction. Mm-hmm. I always had to correct them and say, well, actually, no, you know, it's not a distraction. We can do both at the same time. Mm-hmm. See, we are attacked in many guises. Some of it is actually structural through physical violence, and some of it's spiritual. Mm-hmm. And we have to deal with all of it. We don't let any of it escape. And so, you know, let me flip the narrative for 1 second. You know, we should be asking also, what does these statues, what do these names do for the beneficiaries of this supremacist system? Well, it tells the European child who actually doesn't have
inside their locker room this season for the playing of the Star-Spangled Banner, as well as the NFL's new addition to pre-game ceremonies, Lift Every Voice and Sing, often referred to as the Black National.
I don't know what happened there. Can you hear me?
No, it's all right. I've just muted them. They just came in and I had to mute them. All right, you can carry on. Sorry.
Thank you, sister.
Sorry.
No, yeah, so if we look at what the opposite is, I mean, because there's the question about doing nothing, because when people say, no, we should be dealing with police brutality, that's it. It's like that's in custody is the only issue to deal with. We shouldn't be dealing with, you know, curriculum. We shouldn't be dealing with statutes. We shouldn't be dealing with anything else. It's violence, it's death. Well, I argue, well, hold on, what is the option of doing nothing then? Because something's created this culture where people feel they can kill us with impunity, where they think they can trample over our rights, our dignity with impunity. Something has emboldened other people to go out there and grow up thinking, I can conquer everything and it's okay. And that is this symbolic violence. This symbolic violence that's in the news. I mean, they call it the news, but essentially it's murder, death, kill. You know, every single day, murder, death, kill. You turn on the TV stations, it's murder, death, kill. Every single channel, murder, death, kill. You know, it's like, you know, we struggle to find nurture, liberate, heal, protect. You know, these are not the cultural values that are put at the forefront. I'm not saying, of course, that all Europeans ascribe to murder, death, kill. We see fantastic activists from their community that work against that agenda. But of course, even the activists who are outside our community that are working, you know, in fields that we are sympathetic with, that we align to, they are still empowered by murder, death, kill. They are still empowered by the community. And so, I mean, I'm doing research right now looking at institutional activism. And, you know, I coined a term called fadism. So it means that, you know, George Floyd was murdered. And we've seen we've seen other murders. We've seen the recent shooting of our brother Jacob 7 times in the back. And what's happening is that the call for Black Lives Matter in the UK is actually diminishing. We're still fighting. We're still making the cause that our lives have worth and that we have to fight for change. But all the allies that were on the streets earlier, and it was lovely seeing them on the streets, they've actually gone into the background. They've found something else to be interested in. And that's the benefit you have when you have the privilege of a system where you are the ethnic majority, and that's only in the UK, obviously, where you are the ethnic majority. That actually means that you can actually dip in and out of causes and dip out. We don't have such privilege.
Right. You know, Bob Marley says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our mind. And we sing it. How do we do it?
I'm going to sound like a scratch record. It is education. And it's recognizing that education doesn't just come out of a book. It's recognizing education comes in all these different forms. I learned about the Honourable Marcus Messiah Garvey from a Burning Spear record. I had no idea who he was. I heard the record and I thought I had to go to it. You know, I mean, you know, on my playlist, I listened to, there's a tune, 13 Dead, Nothing Said, they like a little soundboy in their head, fire burning, fire burning. I use culture continuously to make sure that I never would forget, but to make sure that I can always keep what's happening to our ancestors in the forefront of my mind. And then I write and I adapt it so I can transmit it forward to the next generation. So when Marley said emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, that's what it means. It means that we often physically enslave ourselves by being addicts to a media, to a culture that's actually poisoning us. We live in this system, so we have to find a way to survive. I'm an anti-capitalist, but I need money to survive. I have to find ways. I get that. That's just being a realist. It doesn't mean that we had to deliberately poison ourselves. That where we can wean ourselves off and then completely eradicate bad practices, bad ideologies, bad theories, that's what we do. Sometimes we have people in our circles that are bad-minded spirits. They're never going to change. So we try, we work with them, we push back, we learn, we accommodate. But if they are working against us, this is the hard thing. There's a really good saying, not all skin folk are kinfolk. If they're working against us, we have to learn to let go. I struggle with that. But all of that is part of all of that is dealing with mental slavery. My father always told me nothing more important than family. I still believe that. But sometimes we have to recognize that family extends to outside blood. And And family that is outside blood and inside blood can sometimes work against us. So it's that level of honesty. You know, that's how we deal with emancipating ourselves from mental slavery, recognizing what mental slavery is. If you don't recognize that you're mentally enslaved, then you're going to keep smoking from the cool, you know, smoking from whatever, drinking the Kool-Aid. You're going to keep doing all the things that are bad because you don't recognize that it's keeping you enslaved.
But that's the trick, isn't it? To lull us into that place of falling asleep. The analogy of the frog in cold water, and you turn the pot on, it will die. Because we're not dropping them into hot water where they'll jump out again. So that's perpetually, people speak about the tell-lie vision, which is the film industry, which you talked about earlier on. And, I'm ashamed to say this, but, growing up in here on a diet of cowboy and Indian films, that when I had the opportunity of a free passage to go to the US from an auntie, I didn't want to go because I thought they were just shooting everybody in the street, and when I did go, I'm looking over my shoulder to see, who's coming and where they're coming from, so that thing, it goes in.
It does. And that's why that society in America is armed. That's why it has militia that's murdering African Americans. That's why police officers who come from those militias can actually kill us and feel they can do so with impunity. That's their legacy. That is the gift that Britain gave to America when it murdered the Amerindian people who were there beforehand.
Yes.
The poison is so clever, and this is the thing that which one of the things that really annoys me, and this is the hardest work that we have to do as human beings and as Pan-Africanists. The system will reward you if you sell out your people. So if I use my creativity, if I use my hard work ethic to actually hurt my community, I'm gone clear. I will be, Master Toyin Agbetu, KBE, OBE of blah, 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 blah. Knighted, I would have bowed down to their monarch and received every accolade, gone clear. And so we have to do this work with a level of humility and knowing that when you do this work, you have made a conscious decision to take the harder but more righteous route.
Yes.
And many people struggle with that. In a world where you're told that your worth is determined by your productivity, by your assets, by your money, very difficult for people to say, actually, no, my worth is designed by the fact that I can look in the mirror every single day and say, you know what, I like that person.
Yes.
My spirit is still intact.
I love that.
That's a hard decision for people to make. I mean, I grew up wanting to be, believe it or not, when I was younger, I wanted to be a detective. I still love Columbo every Sunday. I mean, while I'm working,
you are a detective.
I love detective work. I wanted to catch bad people. That was one of the things as a young person I wanted to do. I remember the policeman coming to my primary school. It was primary school they started that stupid training from with the piece of blood. They had a little comic. I was reading the comic. I catch bad people. Policeman. And then after school, as you get older, you learn with the stop and search, the amount of attacks I've had by the police, I've been tasered by you realize, hold on. The police are the bad people.
Yes.
I can't be a policeman. And that's how I become an activist. Because I don't want to be doing righteous work, but I will never my energy to an institution that is murdering my people.
Yes.
It's the same thing with the honor system. When people bow down before the British monarch, I have a simple rule. Dishonorable people cannot bestow honors. We've already got one of them who's a child rapist or sex abuser. How can dishonorable people then give you a knighthood and then you go and meet our ancestors as a member of the British Empire? What kind of man? This is the confusion. And this is why I say we have to know ourselves and we have to understand the system has got so many different tricks in it. I mean, I'm probably going off topic a little bit, but
no, you're fine. You're speaking truth, and it's logical and it's practical. Sister Patsy, you got a question?
Yes. I want to thank you for what you said, Toyin. As usual, it's always brilliant, and I agree with everything that you've got to say. And it's always very encouraging, inspiring. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask what you felt about what seems to be going on at the moment, this sort of a lot of people are moving out of UK and America and going to different parts of Africa, Ghana, I don't know, Zambia, even Tanzania, Uganda, wherever. What do you feel about that? Do you think it's time for people to start making moves, or do you think that they can do more from here in the UK, for example? Or would you encourage people to move? I don't know. I want to know your thoughts on that.
That's a brilliant question, and it's a difficult one, and I'll answer it as honestly as I can because I don't know any other way. I believe spiritually that we're here for a purpose in this beast, the belly of this beast. For a long time, for me, the game plan was very simple. You know, I'm going to do my thing, get my children to a certain age, make them independent, and I'm back off home. And I still plan to go home. But as I've grown, I've realized that actually it's not by chance that I'm here. It's not by chance that when I read their madness and see what they're doing, I kind of can just see through it. And I think that those of us that live in the belly of the beast, those of us who have got that level of consciousness, we're gifted with the ability to see through the lies in a way that our family back at home is not. So like, for example, when I go, my wife is St. Lucian. So whenever I go to St. Lucia, you know, sit on the beach and they got me a nickname, they call me the African. So we sit on the beach and we reason and they're drinking the rum and I'm getting bust up at Domino's because I'm rubbish at it. And then we start talking politics. And then all of a sudden, this rhetoric comes up about how great Britain is. You know, the whole streets paved with gold nonsense, the new version of that. And no matter what I tell them that there's not just VAT, you're taxed to watch the BBC, you're taxed to have a car, you've got to pay. No matter how much I tell them, they refuse to accept that this place is as bad and wicked as it is. And it's because they're doing this comparative study. And so I have to break things down. And I realize as an educator that I can kind of let them know a little bit, but they have to feel it. They have to go through it themselves. And then I think about that and I think, well, hold on. Why is it that whenever someone comes from home, and I'm talking about whether it's the Caribbean or the continent, and they come to the UK, that there's a different kind of work ethic. There's a different kind of, not always, but there's always this kind of like, wow, with all these opportunities, I can do anything. I can make it work. And, you know, I've heard lots of different theories. And, you know, some of them I don't agree with, but some of them, I think to myself, you know what? There is something about saying that you know who you are. That because you haven't been poisoned to believe that you can only achieve so far, you don't see that artificial barrier. So your aspirations is through there. And so you see it, you realize it, you manifest it. Well, with us, we've been poisoned since school days to believe that we cannot get no further. Mm-hmm. But the beauty of us being here also means that when I go, like sometimes, I remember I was in Ghana and I remember seeing, unfortunately, there's a history of Europeans traveling to our motherland and seeing what happens in the Caribbean as well. And they see our young children and they have their deviant sexual thoughts. And when you're from the diaspora, you can see them and they know that you see them. You say, what are you doing? They know from your accent, they know from your posture, you don't have any fear, you don't have any reverence towards them because we see them. We know that they're not like what happens in the movies where they're all like super buff and they can save the world, everything's perfect, but they have all these weaknesses. We know, we see the great ones amongst them, we see the very not so good ones. I'm being very kind amongst them. So in answer to your question, so just to place it back home, those same conditions apply for us who want to go back home. I think that it's good that some of us wants to go to the motherland to actually escape white supremacy. Some of us want to go back to redevelop the motherland or contribute to motherland. But what I just said before, which was the slip, which I was supposed to say afterwards, is the problem I have. Some of us go back with the wrong spiritual energy. Some of us go back to colonize the motherland. When sometimes I'm back at home on the continent, I sometimes hear Africans from America talking in a way that they conceive of Africans in the motherland like if we're stupid, like we don't understand how the system works, how the beast is. Mm-hmm. And if we're going home with that spiritual energy, it's best that you just stay where you are. because we have enough bad-minded people all over the globe. We don't need to import bad-minded Africans. If you're going back home, as a spiritual journey to get away from the oppression that's in the West, that's cool, because Africa is our home. Every African has a right back there. So I'm completely in support of that. If you're going back home to actually give back to the motherland, that's a good thing as well. But we have to know where our spiritual connection is, because we have to acknowledge that those of us in the diaspora, we have assets of working in this system, but we had disadvantages in that we're colonized. I mean, I don't like to say it. There's a part of us that is colonized. I'm speaking to you in English. I'm not speaking to you in Yoruba. I'm not speaking to you in Hausa. I'm not speaking to you in Wolof. So even the fact that I'm dreaming in English and my Yoruba is so poor that I can't even communicate frequently with my children or my family back at home means that I have to continuously be doing work on myself. So this is the reason why I'm saying it's not an easy answer. There's some positives, there's negatives, but Africans went back to the motherland from Americas and they did the whole Liberia nightmare. They tried to make an American state in Africa and they oppressed the Africans, indigenous Africans who were living there. So it's all about spirit. Right now in America, the growth of the ADOS movement, I don't know if you've heard about the ADOS movement, what they call it, the American Descendants of Slavery. They've formed this new identity. They've rejected African Americans. It's a growing movement and they're disconnecting from Africa completely. And what they're saying, they're doing this so they can say, right, if there's reparations, the money comes to us, the ADOS, not to African Americans because they come from the continent. This kind of spiritual backwardness we don't want that back at home. We don't want that exported out. That's been birthed by miseducation in the West. So I'm saying that we have to think of all those questions. The motivation, the first thing is, why do you want to go home? What is it you're contributing? And I think when you're going home, there's only two real reasons to go. One, for sanctuary, for spiritual, it's a spiritual connection me back. And you just want to be out of the madness. You've done your work here. You just want to be somewhere where you're safe. It's love, it's healing. That's perfect reason to go home. Or you've learned enough from here and you want to give. The same thing what the Chinese do. They're brilliant at that. Cultural exchange. They go to different countries, they learn from the best institutions, they take it back and they give it to the people and use it to strengthen their nations. That's the other reason to go. But if it's just there for vanity or just to say that, I'm a super African, that's what I call it. No, stay where you are, man.
All right. Thank you. Sister Dr. Sandra Richards got a question for you. Excellent.
Greetings all.
Greetings.
First of all, I have to declare my unadulterated, undiluted, unconditional love for this man, Brother Toyin. I will do it over and over again. That is not why I opened my mic, though. I opened my mic to when you said that the language, and greetings everybody. I do apologize. Auntie Jean, Brother King, and everybody else, Patricia. I'm forgetting my manners, sorry. When you mentioned that you dream, the language that we dream in, it prompted me to ask you to expand on that, because I have found myself saying over the last 2 years that English is not my first language, because I recognize that there's so much that I can't express using English. English is, to my mind, a level of colonialism and bondage. So could you say a little bit more about that, not being able to speak in your mother tongue and what that means to us as diasporan Africans, Pan-Africanists, and so on and so forth. And if you can link it to the idea of being a super African or whatever, that going back to the motherland with colonial nonsense, that would help, because I would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Sister Queen. And the love is reciprocated. I'll say that first of all. Okay, to answer, there's two components to that. So I'll answer the last one first, which is how does it link to this super African theory that I put out there. Okay, if you think about the misschooling or the miseducation system, the schooling system, and you think about Britain is quite backwards when it comes to teaching what they call modern foreign languages. So it uses language as a colonizing tool. So it doesn't matter how many people of a particular heritage are in its nation, it only teaches the languages which is going to give it economic benefit. So you can learn Mandarin now in schools because they want to colonize and take advantage and then catch up with China. It's got nothing to do with a love of the people trying to learn the culture to help them, but it's purely exploitative. And it works. I mean, it's like, you know, they teach our children French or Spanish, whichever one has the economic benefit at the time. And one of the things about language and humans is that once you've learned a language, what is the first thing you want to do with that language? Well, you want to use it. And if you want to use it, you want to go to that place. So when the schooling system kind of indoctrinates our children with languages that are not African, then what happens, it embeds them deeper into Western cultural values. They want to go to France. They want to go to Spain. They want to practice this language. And then obviously with the political mindset that we are trained to adopt, then what happens is that we then start to do capitalist and unspiritual kind of practices, which is another issue. So that's the problem. That's what we're trying to avoid. But what is the implications and ramifications? Wow, that's a really honest introspection. I've got to do for that one. Okay, so I'm at home. Down the road, there are 4 Nigerian little food shops. There's a barber, there's a couple of food shops. And so I walk past them, I say, Ekaro, you know what I mean? You know, Bayani, I speak little bits of Yoruba, pidgin Yoruba. And they humor me by referring back to me with Yoruba. And in the moment someone else comes and they want to talk about something political, something real, they flip to fluent Yoruba and I'm excluded. I can't talk to my family. They're an extension of my family, you know what I mean? My blood family. So this is a problem. So how do I resolve that? Well, I think that when we dream, one of the assets we have with dreaming is not the fact that we're just using words, but we're also using images. So our dreams are like, you know, it's probably a simplistic rendition, but they're mini movies. You know, we kind of like, we can't direct it completely, which is good because that's something that I think that comes from beyond us. But when we first go to sleep, I don't know about, you know, many of you, when I first go to sleep, you know, sometimes if I'm still got a lot of consciousness, I try and shape it the way I want it to go. And then by the time I'm done, it's gone where it needed to go. And that's supposed to be like that. I think it's a spiritual dimension to dreaming. But I think that talks very much to how we can actually use a different language, which is not English, in our awakening state, when we're awake. I think that we sometimes forget that the ability to make music, the ability to draw, any form of communication that's non-verbal is also a powerful tool, a very powerful language. We have been trapped into thinking that words, and that's because, you know, we are socializing the British way of thinking that words are the be all and end all of everything. Now, as a nerd, obviously I love books, I love literature, I love reading. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that's not important to me, but I also love sci-fi, for example. I also love graphic novels. And I love, when I say love, music. These things bring emotions to me. They bring images in my mind. They bring the stories. All these things are different languages. And by creating our own language, by creating our own words, even if those words are not legitimated by the Oxford Dictionary, by creating our own words, we keep our story alive. We keep our passions alive. We service our purpose. It's like when we talk about off the plantation, we know that we're talking about work, and we know we're calling it plantation because we don't want to let go of the injustice. It has to be dealt with, and we ain't going to let go of certain words until we have resolved that issue. There's power in us doing that. It's like when people started taking fun out of African Americans, when they started creating new names, Letitia, LaQuanta, and all this sort of stuff. And people were like, oh my God, what are they doing? It's so ghetto. Well, no, it wasn't. What they were doing was that they were trying to, no, they weren't just trying, they were forming a new identity that separated them from the barbarism of American imperialism. And even though having British sensitivities, it sounded a little bit quaint and a little bit, you know, cliquey and a little bit kind of like whatever disparaging words people used, it was inventing a new language, a new way to talk. And I think that's what we have to have confidence in doing. It goes back to the idea of not being afraid of being wrong. When we dream, we're not wrong. The dream happens, and then some of us are gifted that we can interpret it. Some of us are gifted that we can divine from it. Some of us, I don't remember my dreams, generally. I mean, that's it. As soon as I wake up, unless you ask me within the minute when I wake up what I dream of, it goes. But I do know that normally after I've dreamed, all the problems that I've had the day before, not all of them, but most of them, the heavy ones, are gone. The solutions, the craziness that you hear in me now, the insanity, and I'm proud to be insane, manifests itself in the real world. So I'm happy not knowing. And I think that's where we need to have confidence with language. We need to understand that when we make up words, when we misspell words on purpose, these are not mistakes. These are ways of us compensating for the fact that the English language has got so many traps in it. The N-word is a perfect trap. You know, we never invented the N-word. We would never there's no African language on the planet of 1 billion, I think there's around 1.2 billion of us now on this planet that would create the N-word. Why would you create a word to dehumanize you? But we were given that trap by those who believe in racial superiority. So this is the point about us saying creating our own words. We have to have alternatives, and those alternatives might be messy, they might be clumsy, but they're ours. And as long as they communicate what we mean, if I make up a word, vibe love it, yeah, there you go. And not Zoomalicious, there you go. This conversation with my family right now is Zoomalicious. That's not going to be in Oxford Dictionary. But if you understand what I mean by spiritually Zoomalicious, which I'm just making up right now, then the word has done its job. And if I continue to use that phrase and I dream that phrase, then we start creating a version of Zoom that is Zoomalicious, spiritually uplifting. That's how we start to liberate ourselves. So I go on a bit.
No, thank you. Thank you. Great question, great opening, lots of insight there. And I think, Brother Toyin, you're going to have to come back because, believe it or not, time has slipped by so quickly, you know, and there's so much more for you to share with us. You had another word you said, was it faddism?
Faddism.
Faddism. So,
yes.
So I'm going to ask you to close with whatever it is that you want to give us as a message for closing. And if you can explain that word and its context or connotations, if it's appropriate, then we would welcome that too. And thank you. After you've spoken, Sister Jean, Auntie Jean.
Oh, you want me to speak now?
No, after Toyin has
okay, all right,
spoken, then we'll segue to your Auntie Jean. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the first thing is I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to family. You know, I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole duration, but I will keep logging in. I mean, I will have it on. I tend to, when I'm working and I'm in family mode right now, I tend to try and have these spiritually Zoomalicious discussions on, and I treat it like a radio so I can hear what's going on. And I can't see your beautiful faces, which is the only shame about that when it's happening. So I'll still try and keep in contact, but I do have to leave soon. So I thank you for the platform. I thank you for giving me the opportunity. That is, and I also thank you for creating the opportunity, because that's the one thing, you're manifesting this space for us. And often we forget that it's within our abilities, within our gift, and it's within our responsibility to do so. You're making it happen. You know, obviously, I'm not just speaking about yourself, but Royce and Sister, I'm talking about, you know, everyone involved together and making this happen. Faddism, which is what my research deals with, is this process of where people who get engaged in activism choose, and I'm going to link it to everything, choose to put all their energy into a cause for one moment. They get very excited about something. You know, someone's died, it's an injustice, and they all scream and they all put their money and they throw everything and resources and promotion into it. And but for them, because they don't live it, they don't feel it, it's what I call a buffet style approach to activism.
Mm-hmm.
So after 3 months, maximum 6 months, they get bored. They don't want to talk about racism anymore. They don't want to talk about, you know, deaths anymore in custody. And so what they do, they just pick another cause and they move on to the next fad.
Mm-hmm.
But the danger for us is that if we get reliant on that moment when everyone is talking about our concerns,
mm-hmm.
and we start thinking that we can depend on it, and we start reshaping the way we do things to match that, when they pull out with their fadism move, everything we've built on that, or the expectation that the funding, that the media resources, the coverage, the publicity is going to be there, collapses.
Yeah.
And so we have to keep doing things the way that we do it. And when we are doing work, spiritual work, it becomes incumbent for us to make sure that we say, you know what? If you want to support us, you follow us. We're leading this thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't get behind us, then don't get with us. Do it your way in your own corner. Respect to what you're saying. Like the fact that you're an ally, but that's what fadism really entails. So what I love about what we're doing tonight is that we are leading this, that we are shaping this, that you are setting the agenda, and that we are collectively contributing to it. And it doesn't depend on anyone else just to speak just our truth. So I'm going to sign off there.
Thank you. Give thanks.
Thank you, and
Okay.
Ashe.
Thank you very much, Brother Toyin. Thank you. There's a couple of things in the chat. Sister Dr. Sandra Richards said yes, Zoomalicious. A couple of people have said yes, they like the Zoomalicious. Also, Janeri, was it? Yes, she said we people have got the best lyrics and charm to raise the sun. Patricia Palmer says that she likes the Zoomalicious as well. From Joan, every word you say is precious. Sister Queen, funny, she makes up words up all the time. And she said, true you are talk. And there's quite a few. The list goes on about how many people have actually sort of like appreciated your presentation this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Original.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm gonna sign off. I'll look at the comments and if I need to answer a question. But
one love. Don't forget our book list, please, brother.
Ah, you know what? I had forgotten. I will thank you very much. It's old age.
Not only the book list, but also your contact details.
Oh, okay. Well, that's easy. You just type Toyin into Google. There's only one crazy insane Toyin. But thank you. I should do that. I'll have a quick look at the comments before I sign off.
Sure. And if you know, alternatively, you can email me and I can put in the list on your behalf. So, all right. Thank you.
Ashe.
Give thanks. Ashe. And now we're going to move on to our sister Ella Yemi. And Ella Yemi is going to be telling us about the benefits of Reiki. So, Sister Ella, are you ready? For you to unmute yourself and come.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a young voice. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna work with my daughter.
Okay, no, there's no problem.
Okay.
All right. Greetings and welcome.
Hi everybody. Yes, it's me.
Hi, that's not me.
Yes.
Yeah. But hold on, I'm gonna call one of my children to come take her real quick. Okay, hold on a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, I can do this. I'm gonna do this. All right. Okay, so this is my first presentation on the Zoom. So like, I'll do my best. It'll be short. It's not gonna be long anyway. So yeah. Right, the benefits of Reiki is a energy healing system. It's a Japanese system. The story of it is that how it came from Japan And as you know, there is Black people in Japan as well. So that, you know, so it came from Japan, and it works on the energy. There's like 3 energy around the body. There's 3 of them. But they're all different names, all different layers, which I can't go into right now. And the energy works on the body. So basically what it consists of is like you putting hands on a person. There's a hands on and hands off way of dealing with a client. So like you can have it really close. You could come in really close and put your hand on their body, on their aura, which is around the body. Some people have various effects while they're on the table. They can either cry, they either break down, they have an episode, you turn into a counselor. The Reiki also consists of like natural healing process. So when the hands is placed on the client, there's something that happens to the client, and sometimes it can happen right there on the table, and other times, right, it can happen after the client's left. So there's 3 effects that happens with the Reiki. Also, the reason why it's called Reiki is because like it's a unified energy, the chi energy that we deal with. So when the practitioner is putting hands on you, they open up themselves. So they have to put their hand in prayer form to assist, so it comes from their heart. Somebody also told me that's how it's an exchange of chi. So you're literally exchanging your chi and giving to that person. But some people already have this natural healing in them. They're already healers already, but they just don't know it sometimes. That's normally what happens, because I've come across a few of those. So you'll come across all types. The Reiki can turn into a counseling session. Like I said, the counseling session, you can get a person who's very anxious, doesn't talk a lot, could be very quiet, could be very placid. Then something happens, there's a reaction, it causes a reaction in the body, causes a reaction in the mind in the head as well. So it's all mental, physical, and spiritual. So you can get all them levels. Reiki can be used at any basis. You can put it on plants, flowers, animals, distance Reiki. It's very vast, it's very beyond. My Reiki master, she also talked about the water, the positive and the negative. So Reiki is like that. Like you say positive, you get positive back, kind of thing. So yeah, I just went straight into it, because if I explain the basis of all the auras and all that, it can go on and on forever. Reiki has no bounds. Some Reiki practitioners turn into doulas, they turn into yoni healers, they turn into a lot of things. It has no boundaries. It's boundless. When some people start out to become Reikiists or Reiki practitioners / healers, they also can feel stuff all around them. Like they can be in a room, they can feel people. There's like I'll give an example, for instance. I was somewhere, and you literally feel the whole room, all the people in the room, you can feel their trauma, you can feel their tears. You, the Reiki practitioner, can turn angry. You're just in the room, and you literally come away from that situation, and you're mad, you're vexed. You don't understand why you're angry, why you're vexed, and all that. You absorb the energy in the room. This can happen a lot. So the next thing also that Reikiists also go through after they've gone through the first level, because there's 3 levels of Reiki. I don't know if I'm going fast, because I know I'm jumping a bit, yeah? There's 3 levels of Reiki. the first level of Reiki is the first level is when the Reikiists don't become a practitioner. The second level, the first level is when they're practicing on themselves. They are not a Reiki practitioner. They just practice family members, friends, whatever. The second level, they become a Reiki practitionist. The third level, they become the master. Then there's a master teacher. The master teacher can then start teaching. This forms a triangle. So it's just a triangle thing. It's endless, it's boundless, like I said. It's continuous. There is, I don't know whether I covered everything, so I don't know whether anybody want to ask me questions, because like, I'm trying to be short and sweet here. I don't want to, I don't want to go on and on waffle. I just want to cut to the chase. Yeah?
What do you mean when you say different levels? You said there's 3 different levels. So the first level is that you're taught to do Reiki on yourself?
Yeah.
Or yes?
Yes. The first level is self-healing of yourself. This can last for a year, this can last for 6 months. Some people can be for 2-3 years. So yeah, that's the first level. Once they pass the first level, the second level, which is the therapist level, right? They're able to heal other people. But so once they've done that, right, there is the third level, the master level. The master level.
How do you know? Sorry to interrupt, but how do you know when you've passed the first level? How do you know? Is there a certain time limit, or is it because you've gone to the second stage of teaching?
Well, what happens? What happens is when you go to the classes that the master teacher gives you, I think like most cases, sometimes you'll get a test with most teachers, because they're like that. They can be like that, right? Most teachers, if you get a real good teacher, they will test you, especially if they haven't taught you, they will test you. There's some leave it for a long time. I think it all depends on lifestyle, life choices, stuff like that. A lot of things could happen within a year, 2 year, whatever. So there's not really a time limit, because sometimes the Reiki fire is always in your hand, because that's why there's a book called Fire in Your Hand. So you have this fire in your hand naturally anyway, right? So the Reiki never leaves you, because once you're attuned, like from the first, the second time, right, the Reiki is still in the person. It never leaves them, no matter what. Yeah.
Okay. We've got a couple of people who need to ask a question. Sister Patricia and then Sister Queen.
Okay.
And then I can see, is it Ollie and Supreme have unmuted. So if you can do in that order, Sister Patricia.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's taken you back, but I wanted to just find out what led you into taking on this practice.
I started out doing beauty therapy. That was the first thing I did, and I met a Reikiist there. I did the introduction to beauty, and then the Reiki, she did a Reiki on me and my friend, and then she took me to a center, or I found my own center, and that's how I got into it. But I've come from a line of women who always was that way inclined in some form or fashion. They always had that knowledge of some type of healing. So I've seen things when I was younger, which I won't go into because it's too long. And so it's always was in me, but I didn't recognize it per se. So it came out more when I did the training that I needed to do, which is the introduction to beauty, because my first love was Thai hand and foot massage. That was my first study. Then there was back massage. Then it was Swedish massage, and then I did the Reiki afterwards. I did the Reiki either before, the first one before, and then I did the other two afterwards.
Okay, Sister Queen.
Greetings. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Greetings, Auntie Jean, Sister Patricia, Brother Royston, and everybody. Greetings, everybody.
Greetings.
Sorry, it's my beautiful face picture instead. Yeah, very interesting topic, Reiki. You said when Reiki is done, you feel something when you're when it's being done to you, or when you come off, just finished, or when you walk away. But what is it that you feel? What, you know? Why would one receive it?
Well, first of all, when you come to me and you get the Reiki, some people feel it at the spot because they feel the heat around it. Sometimes they call it like there's something around here. They say around here. Sometimes they say I feel it here, or I feel it here, and they feel it when you touch their feet, because there's several parts you have to put your energy on, and sometimes some people feel it right there and then. Because I dealt with a mental patient, I think, at one time. She didn't feel nothing. But when she got off the table, when she got off the chair, because I did a chair one, she was calmer. She was more at peace. She was more zen, I can say. She was different. So it's individual sometimes. It doesn't happen in the same way. There's no, okay, it's going to happen this way, boom, it's going to happen this way, it's going to happen that way. It's whatever the individual wants at that time as well, because sometimes, right, they could come fill out the form and they can say, okay, this part's hurting me, my shoulders hurt me, my head's hurting me, my this is hurting me. Sometimes it's a lot deeper than that, because people have a high level of emotional level, and it can come out to a place where like you can really like put your hand into their void, because that's what you're doing, you're putting your hand into their personal space. So you can pull, it's like you're pulling their pain from them, basically. I think that's the best way I can explain it.
Is it like a cleansing?
Yeah, it's like a cleansing. It's like a cleansing, but sometimes it can take 6 treatments for some people. It can take 1 treatment. It can take 2 treatments.
I witnessed. Excuse me. I witnessed somebody having one, and they were very much sexualized. When she received, and she couldn't express how she felt because she was very sexualized. Is that is that a common thing?
No, it's not a common thing, because sometimes I'm on the Zoom. Oh, sorry. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they haven't expressed other things, and unless you pick up on it, because with the sexualization thing, some people hold it in very well, so you would never know to that certain you know, like you'll never know. Unless you touch upon a nerve. They might have had i.e. an abortion, and you don't even know. And not unless like you feel the womb or
sorry,
something.
Rewind. What did you
like if one of the patients have had that and they got pregnant, in other words, you know, like when somebody's been sexualized from young,
okay, right?
And they have a baby and like they haven't spoken about it, and right, I mean I haven't met a person like that personally, but you do pick up something as well, because like you normally get a whisper, I call it a whisper anyway, I get a whisper. Some will feel it. They'll feel it. They'll literally feel the part of the whatever's going on. Like,
so okay, so you mean, sorry to interrupt, I'm trying to get the understanding. So if, say, a person was abused when they was younger, or raped 5 years prior, or something negative like that, do you mean? And when they have this Reiki, it's a healing process and they feel it in that area. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, the most will feel it, but then also saying that in a way, they will probably need other counseling from other places, because, like, you know, Reiki might not just be the one that can help them. So, like, they might have to be forwarded to another, posted
yes,
to
definitely. Mm-hmm.
So it can't dissolve the thing totally. You know what I mean? It can't dissolve, not the issue, shall I say, not the thing, the issue totally. Right? Sometimes a Reikist will work with another practitioner, and they will work between them. One dealing with the physical and one dealing with that other aspect. So that's because when I've worked with people, I worked with a crystal healer one time. So I did my part, and the lady needed something else. So I passed it on to the crystal healer. Mm-hmm. The crystal healer dealt with her and did whatever. So that's normally what happens, right? We complement each other. Right. And so whatever is needed for the person, because sometimes, right, even though you come in with one thing, it could be like 10 things or 5 things wrong with you.
Yeah, I was about to say that somebody can come in for Reiki just because, as you said, they might have a pain in their shoulder or their back or something like that, but it also brings something that is suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
Because it brings up, you know, that they've suppressed for a long time, so much, so almost so that it's gone right to the back of the mind. They actually forgot about it, but the Reiki can actually bring it to the forefront, and basically they have to address whatever issues that they actually suppressed.
Yeah, it can literally bring a lot up. It could bring a lot up because even with the practitioner, because I'll go back to the practitioner, right? Because, like, you know how, right, on the chat someone's talking about healing of self. The practitioner also, when they go through their first attunement, right, and they do their self-healing, they go through layers of healing. The healing never stops. It's endless. They're always going over another hump. They come across another block, they have to go over it. So that's the same thing with the client. So the practitioner is going through what they're going through because just because you're a practitioner, it doesn't mean that you're inhuman, right? So you go through what you have to go through and deal with, which some practitioners don't always want to do that. But I just using myself as an example, right? I don't know about anybody else. But
so basically you get their issues or their problems, not their as deep as them, but you can feel their problems. It comes to you, in other words.
So
it's almost like you take it off of them and bring it onto yourself, or it comes onto you and then you have to get rid of it. How does it work?
Well, yes, you're right there. And yes, when you've done the Reiki on the person, you have to find an outlet to send the energy to, because if you keep it on you, it's like you're bringing the person home with you. It's like you're walking with a shadow, isn't it? Literally on you. So most Reikiists, they will do a clearance before they've even left the building, before they even leave a place. They make sure
they have to release it
to the building. Wood, particularly, is the best place to send the Reiki, which I normally do. I normally send it to the wood. Or if I'm working with feather, or I'm working with, what else could I be working with? I'll be working with my sound thing, my shaky thing. And that's taking on the stuff as well. So I have to clean my instruments, my tools. My feather has to be cleaned. My tools have to be cleaned, not only with sage, because sometimes, right, you have to sweep off the energy. And so you have to go out and let it out into the atmosphere as well, because that's how I deal with it.
Okay. So in the same vein, you can also transfer your energy onto the person, your client. As well as receiving it, you can also transfer it onto them.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, you can. You can say that you can, but I would say it all depends on the practitioner.
Yes,
if the practitioner knows what they're doing, that would never happen.
Right, exactly. That's my point. I mean, you have to be clean. You have to clear yourself first before you have your client. But if you don't, it can be transferred.
And even after they've done the client, they have to make sure that they don't take that client home with them, because they're children.
As you said before, yeah. It's very much like, I mean, I was in the church for 25 years, and I used to work at the altar, and I used to pray for individuals, and it's the same principle that, you know, before you touch anybody else, you have to make sure that you're clear, because if you're praying for someone and next minute a spirit jump on you, then you're in trouble, because you then have to obviously deal with that spirit. So it's yeah, I understand the principle of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't know. I just didn't realize that it was what you said it was, and more. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's it.
Lorna's asked, so you work with other therapists with Reiki, and what are they?
I've worked with well, there was a practitioner that I worked with. We worked in Queen's Park ages ago, long time, and he did his energy healing was like chi through it's a Chinese one, it's called KCR. That's what the energy is called, the energy healing system's called, but not a lot of people know about it. It's with vials and stuff. So I've worked with him. I've worked with the crystal healers, like I said. Most of the time I work by myself, but those are the main two, because I haven't really, when I really wanted to work with others, it never happened. But so I just went on by myself. So
there's a Sister Junie's got a question.
Yeah.
Sister Junie.
Okay.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Oh, thank you so much for that breakdown. I've always enjoyed Reiki and open to Reiki. And when the other sister from the church, Sister Queen, was talking to you to understand what was taking place, the first thing that you broke down as a principle, that Reiki works with from the heart to the heart. So the Reiki practitioner is not in a position to come into it if they're not in a good place. They're not able to offer that treatment.
Yeah.
And so those who's receiving it has to be discerning.
Yeah.
However, I know a lot of people are worried about whether it's hands-on or hands-off. But what you described was so powerful. I teach a lot of people. I don't do any hands-on work, but I am affected by people, whether it is teaching, whether it is ministering. I pick up on that aura and the spiritual energy just in, as you said, in our atmosphere. So I just said to you, I either teach or I minister, and I do a lot of healing work without putting any hands on, but I'm affected by people. I'm affected by my atmosphere.
I think find the tool.
Sorry.
Okay. And I think it's really important that we have our spiritual healing team of the different disciplines like this to help to allow the body to come back to balance, because a lot of us are walking into different energies. Just in the fact that we're even doing what we're doing now to gain energy right in your straight path, you can walk into other energies. So we need to understand the unseen reality that's taking place. So I really thank you, Yemi. I like the simple way you broke it down. You just got me all excited.
Oh, that's
and
okay.
I want to know exactly where you are. I've probably met you before, and I need some of your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, put your details in the chat. Thank you.
All right, Sis Doctor. You have a question, Sis Doctor?
It's less of a question and more of a saluting Sister Yemi for bringing this to us. We really need more of you young people to come forward and speak of these different ways of healing and let us know that you're there, because we can't have enough healers among ourselves. We have so much trauma and so many challenges and so many practitioners who are out there that don't understand us. So just listening to you and just taking the time to share and actually seeing, I don't know if that young person was your child, but seeing young mothers and young people coming forward, I'm just really, really, really encouraged by your work and by you. So give thanks for coming before us and sharing. I'll make a note of the fact that you're here, and I'm sure, as Sister Junie said, we need you, and we need to know where you are, and we need to see you grow and elevate. And some of us, not Sister Junie, I'm talking about myself, and some of us can just step back. Some of us elder ones can just step back and let you younger ones come through. Give thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions? No. Brother Royston said that we all store unprocessed trauma in our body. For example, trauma exists at the center of cancers. So, yeah.
Well, okay. With the cancer, I've dealt with a cancer patient before, but not with the Reiki, more with foot spa therapy. That was one that I dealt with, a Reiki patient. So, I mean, with the cancer patient. So that's dealt differently because cancer, how can I really go into it? Because I don't want to come off of the subject, because that one I had to deal with my cancer patient with with a foot spa. I've had 2 cancer patients when I was doing my my therapies. So the foot spa was easier for the cancer patients. The Reiki was, you know, it will probably relax them, but it wouldn't be effective on their body because of all that stuff, the tablets and the chemotherapy, what they have to go through, and everything else what they have to go through. So I've only done foot spa with my 2 cancer patients. That's the only thing I can say.
Okay. Okay, Sister Lorna Hunter's got a question for you.
Yeah, that's
Lorna.
Lorna.
Sister Lorna. And so you're gone shy now. Okay, Debbie Allen, I see you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry guys, I was delayed at another meeting, but From what I gather, it seems like you're talking about trauma. And I wanted to ask, is this kind of like the generational, you know, from slavery, where this Jezebel spirit that some women may have, it's because that's what we were only sexual then, and the men were studs. So are we now, just like now, all these years later, addressing the trauma of our forefathers?
With the trauma, first of all, I'll bring you up to speed on that one, because though the trauma was a long time ago, it's about what's happened in your childhood. You see where I'm going? Some people has been through a lot of things in their childhood, a lot. They don't even talk about it most of the time. I've spoken to a few people. It's very deep inside. So because of how I am as a person, I would say, even though I have my own flaws, so I ain't gonna make out like I'm perfect too, yeah? I like me, right, we've gone through stuff in our childhood. So Reiki will find that within you, yeah? So that's because you have to go through counseling, the mind, the mental side of it. There's a spiritual side of it, because every child, when they're coming up, things happen, you know what I mean? So I'm going to bring it back to that level. As for what you're talking about, because yes, as a people, we have been through a lot of stuff. That is true. We have been through the transatlantic slavery as well. So I'll bring it to that. But looking at us as a people, us here now, we don't talk about our problems. The men don't talk about their traumas. Some women don't talk about their traumas. Oh no, I better not say nothing because she's gonna look at me different. I better keep it to myself. You know what I mean? Like, and the Jezebel thing, the only reason why that happens is because young girls, young ladies, from very young, go through young sexual experiences. And what happened is, right, they cannot determine the love from the sex.
Are you saying that something has had to have happened? Supposing it's like curiosity gone wrong, or curiosity without boundaries?
There's that, and there's also the point where, like, the young ladies are taken advantage of. So it can go to that level. So with that said, some people need to go through deep counseling, men or women alike, being in women's circles. Well, not even women's circles, circles on a whole. The village, the women's circle, because in the village, in a village, right, the men will go with the men, the women will go with the women, and not in another way, not the other way that it is perceived. Because when a girl's coming up, she's around the elders teach her certain things and talk to her about certain things. She can go to that elder woman, that particular elder woman, she can talk to that elder woman. Whatever she's going through, she has, I would say, a wise woman that she goes to. So that woman will help her to go through that transition. So I don't want to go deep because I feel that how you would have to talk to me. So, because I'm hearing something from you, but it's not really the subject we're dealing with right now. I feel that we need to deal with that on a separate time, because it can bring up a lot for people.
Yeah, yeah. And you know the saying, sometimes let sleeping dogs lie. If you,
No, not
I
sleeping
feel like
dogs
if
lie.
I've reached this
Not
point of
sleeping
my
dogs
life.
lie. Not sleeping dogs lie. Sometimes, right, you might have to go there. Sometimes, right, you have to go face that thing. So, with that being said, right, we are going, right, you got my details. You can contact me. We talk about it on a separate basis because this is not the time and the place for it. And I won't want to find out whatever is going on with whatever is going on. And I feel that it's you, but it might not be you. It could be your best friend. It could be someone else. So this needs to be talked on a different level.
So I just want to say something here around this subject. This is a way deep subject that we as a community have avoided, pretending it's not there, and it eats away at us. And the example I'll give you is that Michael Jackson would be alive today if his issues were dealt with. And his issues was not primary trauma, but secondary trauma, in that he was placed in the same room as his older brothers who were celebrities and bringing girls back into that room. So when you traumatize the young mind, it doesn't grow in the way that it needs to grow. But also those who've been sexualized from young give out a different aura that creates a sense of, it becomes an easier place for that person to become a victim and to stay in that place as a victim, because and this is true across the whole aspect of what, you know, abuse that happens to the young. When the abuse happened, we were powerless, and the mind is trapped in that powerless state. So the adult has to take steps towards healing. And if the adult don't take steps towards healing, then although we might be fully grown, we have still maintained that childhood mind and state in relation to that aspect of that trauma that's happened to us. You know, it's a deep piece of work, and you don't let sleeping dogs lie. You have to deal with it. You know, you kill it or it'll kill you, in the essence of it. That's all I'm gonna say.
You hit the nail on the head, Weston. There you go.
Can I say something here? And again, you know, to add to what Sister Dr. Sandra said, it is really important for us to have our own healers of African ascendancy or heritage. Simply because when you go for treatment from a practitioner, it may be healing, it may be counseling, it may be other forms of therapy, you open yourself to the energies around you. And although you'll have professional practitioners, you will have people who are doing this for money and are not concerned about the well-being and welfare of the individual, particularly if they have been steeped in racist practices. And this is where we are living, in the belly of the beast, as Toyin mentioned earlier.
Absolutely.
So we need to be very, very careful when we open ourselves, our energies, to people who may not be clean-hearted or clean mentally, and actually maybe doing more damage than good. Right? It doesn't take away the fact that there may be here and there some individuals who are genuine, but I'm just saying we need to be very careful.
And the next, and the thing I'll put the cherry on top of that is you mustn't put your energy everywhere, because some places your energy is not supposed to be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sister
Shaz?
Can
I say something now?
Oh, Sister
Hello?
Shaz, and then we go back to you, Lorna.
Hello.
Sorry.
Sorry, hang on a minute. I just put in something in chat. Amen to that, Patricia. Greetings, Yemi.
Hiya.
Long time no hear. Yeah, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you about my experience of Reiki. I did an experimental workshop, and we did an experiment, and you might be able to relate to this because I'm very interested, like the other sister, about the 3 different stages of Reiki. Yeah, in this workshop, we both put our hands on this woman's shoulder, on each shoulder, and she was asked to give a feedback of what she experienced on both sides, and both sensations on both sides were different from the different persons, and there were reasons for that. And when I'd never done Reiki before, but the feedback she gave me was that her shoulder felt light. But the other lady gave the feedback of the other lady. She said the shoulder felt heavy. And at that time, right before I did that workshop, I did do meditation because I was in the habit of practicing meditation at that time. But the other lady was feeling heavy because she wasn't well, and she was just about to have a stroke and she didn't know. Yeah. So what you were saying about the different stages, I mean, I don't know a lot about it because I've only done a little bit. I know more about acupuncture than I do about Reiki, but the principle is the same. Yeah. And in Chinese acupuncture, the principle is, yeah, that the practitioner's manipulation of the needles is equally as effective, yeah, as the attitude of the practitioner that is treating the client. And I personally have had experience of that, which is why I researched it in the past. Yeah. So those 3 different stages of Reiki, yeah, to me means dependence. That is when you are having treatment yourself as dependent, and then interdependent, which is both ways. And then you describe the last one as the master. Was it the master?
Yeah, the master level.
Yeah, master level.
Master level. And then there's the teacher. So there's 5 of this. There's 5 of them. Yeah, because I said 3 in it. There's 4.
Please come back on again and give us some visual so we can relate to it, because it's really interesting and we need to know, because as Sister Patricia said, there are people out there who are doing it for money and they don't give a whatever about us. They don't care about us. They just want to get our money, and they're not interested in our mental and spiritual well-being, and we really have to be careful. And it's good that we're talking about it on this Zoom.
Yes, thank you, Shaz. We got our last question from Sister Lorna.
Oh yeah, and please can you put your number in the chat, Yemi?
I've put her details. I've put Sister Yemi's details in the chat already. So if you reel up, then you'll see it. Okay, Sister Lorna.
Hi Yemi, how are you doing?
I'm there. I'm in sunshine, sorry.
All right. No, the reason why I was asking the question is I think you were using more than just Reiki. And I just wanted people to understand that you were you're a natural healer, all right, which you mentioned. You're using Reiki, but I also think you're using other therapies that you personally learned, and that's what I was interested in. Because as you know, I do Reiki now. I work with therapies myself, not working with other people, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to know what else you do.
Okay, my therapies I still can do, should I say? Because I haven't lost it. The therapies I did was the Thai hand and foot massage, working with a stick on the feet and the legs. Full body massage, back massage, and the Reiki. I was doing cards.
Okay. Yeah.
I was doing a lot. I was doing quite a few.
Yeah. Right, and that's really I like that, because that's who we are. And going back to the question about you know, who we are and why we don't work with who we are, like our spiritual selves, is because we've lost that contact. But you know, and you're right, if we had all the contact of the people who could guide us through all the different stages of healing, of support, of womanhood, of manhood, things would be a lot different. Right. And the other thing I just wanted to say is that we are so attached to our ancestors in order to get all this knowledge that we need in order to move forward.
Which I do.
Sorry?
Which I do deal with. I deal with my ancestry very deeply. I'm very, very, very proud of my ancestry, because I'm Trini-Bajan by birth, but I like the ether, and I've come from a spiritual Baptist background, and my grandmother was like as I tell everybody, because my grandmother, my mother, she was the head of the church. So it's very,
and it's just important to just bring them in, or both in for yourself. That's all.
It's true. You hit on the head. That's it. Thanks.
All right. So things like that. Okay, take care.
All right,
thank you, Lorna. Thank you so much, Sister Yemi, for your presentation. As you say, you've got the request to come back. I'm just going to read a couple. I've just by heart. Janeri said that it's great uprising, Yemi. Lovely to see your confidence grow. You've been on this journey for many years, and thank you for your words of wisdom and the principle of energy transfer. And Sister Doctor commented on excellent management. Sister Yemi, boundaries managed well, carefully directing us to have certain conversations privately and not in a public space. So and there's other ones I know you can check out afterwards. But thank you so much. On behalf of all, I thank you. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Sister Yemi.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, Brother Royston, we're having a break. Are we going to go straight into our third presentation from Omowale?
Just 5 minutes. So, you know, get your water, get what you need. Just 5 minutes. I give you a little rhythm to while you get your water for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Could we not just have Omowale drumming through the 5 minutes?
Does he want to drum?
He's drumming now.
Oh, is he drumming now?
Yeah.
Ask him to unmute to drum.
Need drumming support to this?
Omowale, did you hear?
He's probably got his thing off.
Okay.
What's the name of this tune? Tune is out of order. One different frequency, you can hear the drums. You know what I mean? You can still hear the drums in it, and yet it sounds so different. Them drums. And that sound like a didgeridoo thing. Wow, imagine God coming in that kind of energy. Or in a movie. Wow, that's money, man. That's tune. Set the scene. What do you see when you hear this tune? No, I don't think it fits the picture. Nah. Nah. I prefer an African village with a mud hut and a whole lot more trees and maybe a giraffe there or a monkey.
So if you unmute while you play your drums, Brother Omowale. Can you unmute? Can you unmute? You're playing, but we can't hear you. Unmute.
I think I've unmuted it, but I'm not sure.
Okay. It's there, but it's faint.
Oh, is it the drumming?
Mm-hmm.
I can't hear.
It's quite faint.
Can my voice be heard?
Yes.
Oh, there. We can hear you now. Oh.
Okay.
Speak and drum at the same time. We will hear you. Hear the drumming. It's picking up your voice with the drum, but it seems like we drum alone. So if you can do a little rap or a little talk over, then we'll hear the drumming.
I'm drumming gently, so as not to disturb them.
All right. Okay.
I received shocking news that you mentioned earlier on, our sister Lady Leo, Sister Jan, crossed to meet the ancestors, and I have to say it pierced me like a knife. An absolutely fantastic sister, loving sister, a giving sister,
very much so.
Served everyone, really selfless in her approach to life. And it hurt me deeply to receive the news today. I received the news that she was in hospital yesterday, and that her situation was very serious. I was actually warned yesterday how serious her situation was. And even though I knew that her situation was extremely serious, I held on to the hope that she would survive and remain with us for longer. I had a conversation with one sister today who rang me in tears. She was so distressed at the passing of Lady Leo. And I have to say, I feel the same way myself. So we did what we could to console each other. I want to remember her at the beginning of the little presentation that I'll be making here today. She's a sister that I truly love, deeply, fantastic person. The kind of person that everybody loves. And I will miss her immensely, immensely. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. We're going to gather to do some drumming together in Roundwood Park in Harlesden on Sunday. Our sister would have been with us to drum for a number of ancestors. And we will certainly be drumming for our sister. We'll be drumming for her in her transition on the route to becoming an ancestor on Sunday. So I just wanted to give a little drums to open, but also give my own personal acknowledgement. I know you've already poured libation and you have given appropriate acknowledgement. I just wanted to give my own personal acknowledgement to a truly great sister, Lady Leo, our sister Jan Francis. Asheo.
Ashe, Ashe, Asheo.
Yeah, I'm here today just to speak again about one of our greats, Marcus Garvey. Of course, it's appropriate to speak about Marcus Garvey here in the Garvey Village. It truly is an appropriate space to speak of that great ancestor, and I'm honoured to, to make contributions in that direction, and thank the management committee of Garvey Village for inviting me to contribute in that way. This is the third in the series of brief presentations that I'll be making. In the first, we looked at not just the birth of Garvey, but the context surrounding the birth of Garvey in an attempt to understand, some of the forces, some of the environmental forces that contributed to the makeup of this, this great man. In the second of the presentations, we looked at the early years of Garvey, but again, we tried to look at the early years of Garvey within the context of things that were going on in that phase of his life. On this occasion, the idea is to look at Garvey in England. It's important that we have an understanding of Garvey in England, if only because we are based here in England. So we should have some sense. Garvey did spend time here in England, and we should have some sense of that and some understanding of that. And in many cases, it may have a very direct impact or direct relationship with our existence here in England or Britain right now. This will be, if you like, the third in the series that looks at Garvey in particular. So we've been very much looking at Garvey, but we'll branch off soon in future presentations to look at things which are bigger than Garvey. Garvey created an organization, a massive organization. And it is because of that organization and the greatness of that organization that we come to understand or recognize the greatness of Garvey. So when we speak of Garvey, we speak of more than Garvey. We speak of the creation that he contributed to humanity, but African humanity in particular. So Garvey had 4 stays in Britain. And what I'll try to do is I'll try to just look briefly at the 4 stays. I know you'll be keeping time on me, Auntie Jean, and I do ask for it on this occasion because there is, there's quite a lot of information. I'm happy for you to just draw me in whenever you feel appropriate. Yeah. The 4 stays that Garvey had in Britain, the first was from 1912 until 1914. The second was 1928. The third was in 1931. And the fourth was 1935 to 1940. Garvey actually crossed to meet the ancestors here in England, in London, in West Kensington, in fact. So there's a very strong connection, not only the colonial connection between Garvey and Britain, but there's a strong physical connection in that he spent, a significant proportion of his life here in England. Not all necessarily by choice, but he did nonetheless. So what I'm going to try to do is just look at those 4 phases, those 4 periods, and just to pick little bits out of them. I'm not sure that I'll be able to do justice to those stays, but just to give people a sense of, Garvey in those periods. So Garvey came to England in the latter part of 1912. We don't know the exact time of Garvey's arrival, the exact date of Garvey's arrival. And the reason for that is enmeshed in the racism of Britain. Britain had a policy of monitoring who arrived from Africa or the Caribbean. So the ships they had coming from Africa or the Caribbean, they had a strict policy of monitoring who landed, writing down their name, which boat they came on, etc., and all of the details were logged. But when a ship came from Europe, there was no such requirement. And so Garvey came over to England on something called the Elder Dempster Banana Boat, which started in Jamaica, went to many of the other islands, picked up people along the way, and then came across the Atlantic. But what used to happen with the Elder Dempster boats is some of them used to come straight to London, whilst others would go to Europe first, travel around to various European nations in the Mediterranean, and then make their way back up to England. Garvey was on one that did the latter trip. If he was on one that had come straight to London, we would have his exact date of arrival. But because he was on one that went to Europe, it was categorized as a boat arriving from Europe, and it did not have the same immigration restrictions. So people who arrived on one of those boats that passed through Europe first were given a kind of red carpet treatment and allowed to just come straight in on the assumption that they were Europeans. So it was a flaw in the racist system of Britain that allowed Garvey to come in unannounced, if I can put it that way. Now, I have personally looked at the records and searched the records to try to find the exact date that Garvey arrived. I can find exact dates for all of his other arrivals in England, but I cannot find an exact date for that one, and that is the reason. Now, Garvey comes to Britain, and Garvey makes an error that many of us make when we come to Britain. And if you were listening to Toyin earlier on, Toyin was explaining the attitude that he encountered in the island of St. Lucia, where Britain could do nothing wrong. And so as much as he tried to correct the sisters and brothers there, they were fixed in their idea that there was something right about Britain. And so Garvey arrived in Britain, and he did not experience any difficulty in finding lodging. So he went to look for lodgings, and there was no problem. He got a place straight away. In fact, he lived in Borough High Street, number 176 Borough High Street. I've been there now. It's not the same building now. It's a new building. So it's not the same building now that it was then when Garvey actually arrived. But he lived at number 176 at Borough High Street, which many of us know. It's just across the road from Borough Station on the Northern Line. And that was his base. Now, because he managed to get, easy accommodation, Garvey made the mistake of thinking that, racism wasn't a problem in Britain. These Europeans are nice people. I came, I looked for accommodation, I got accommodation straight away. So he actually commented on, in a sense, how nice the Europeans were and how free from racism he thought they were at that time. So he came with the same naivety that many of us come with when we arrive in this country. Some of us were born in this country, but even if we were born in this country, our parents came before us, or grandparents now for some of us came before us, and they came with that same naivety. So Garvey was not different in that sense. Now Garvey comes to England, and he's got to make ends meet. He's got a certain amount of money, but not much. So he has to work. So he's doing all kinds of odd jobs. Any job that he can get, he is doing. Even to the point of being a docker, going down the Thames and working on the Thames, etc. But any job that he can do to make ends meet. But he didn't come to England specifically to work. He came to England for a number of reasons, but at the center of those reasons was study. Garvey came to England in order to go to university, effectively. And so study was a critically important part of his reason for coming to England. So he's studying and he's doing lots of odd jobs. Now, the place that he's studying is what is now called Birkbeck University, what until recently was called University of London, Birkbeck College. At that point, it was not yet formally a university. It would be turned into a university later, but it was an institution of higher learning. And it would have been one of the few institutions of higher learning in England at the time. So it would have been an equivalent to coming to university. Now, I've had the opportunity to speak to one of the elders, a Jamaican by the name of Richard Hart. He's now an ancestor, who did the research and actually went to Birkbeck and went through the records. And he actually could not find proof that Garvey went to Birkbeck, that he actually studied there in the records. The records were affected by 2 world wars. And as a result of 2 world wars, not all of the records were intact. So there wasn't written proof that Garvey actually studied at Birkbeck. But what he did find there was an employee who remembered Garvey. So one of the employees that he spoke to, one of the long-serving employees that he spoke to, remembered Garvey as a student at Birkbeck. So that's the evidence that we have. It's known that he studied at Birkbeck, but it couldn't be clinically proved. But we have, an eyewitness account of Garvey being a student in Birkbeck. So at that time, Birkbeck is a university now, and it has massive library facilities and all of those kinds of things. But in those days, it would not have had the kind of resources that it has now. So Garvey spent a lot of his time in the British Library, which is down the road from Birkbeck. So the British Library is the place where you'd find Garvey, and Garvey would stay overnight in the British Library, studying, but it was also somewhere for him to catch a rest if he didn't have enough money to pay for his, his lodgings and accommodation. So money was tight. He didn't have much money. So he would literally study all night in the British Library. And the British Library is very important because the British Library is the place, he would read and read and read and read. And the British Library is where he came across the book Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington that I mentioned briefly at the end of the last presentation. And it was that book that inspired him, that caused him to ask the question, where is the black man's army? Where is the black man's navy? Where is the black man's, he said men of great affairs, but, people of great affairs, and that's find them. And then, so what's happening there? I'm hearing a little something. I'm not sure if people can hear me, yeah? But that's when he decided that if they don't exist, and they didn't, he said, I will help to build them. So he's coming here as a student wasn't just an abstract, I want to learn more. It wasn't just, I want to learn more so I can earn more money for myself. It was, I'm learning in order to contribute to uplifting my people. So he had a big vision, even in those early days. So, Garvey has lots of trouble, eventually finding and holding work. He has lots of trouble, in terms of having enough cash for him to survive, etc. And he's doing all kinds of things, but eventually he lands a job that he really wants. Now, we must remember that Garvey was trained in the skill of printing. So he knew physically how to print books, physically how to print newspaper. He had been highly trained by his godfather to actually do these things. And so Garvey goes to try and get a job on Fleet Street. Now, for younger people may not necessarily remember that Fleet Street was the home of newspapers in Britain. Things have changed now, things have become digitalized, but in the days when newspapers were the big thing, Fleet Street was the home of the newspapers. And Garvey succeeds in getting a job on not any old newspaper, but a newspaper called the African and Oriental Times. So Garvey gets this job on the African and Oriental Times, not as a journalist now, but just as a kind of dog's body. Yeah. So his job is to just do whatever little jobs need doing. He's the gopher. He just does the jobs. And the person that gave him the job was the editor of the newspaper, the proprietor of the newspaper, and his name is Dost Muhammad Ali. Dost Muhammad Ali is a very important figure in Garvey's development. And he becomes something of a mentor to Garvey. So he takes Garvey under his wing, whilst Garvey is here in London. And eventually he gives Garvey a break. He gives Garvey the opportunity to write an article for the newspaper, which Garvey jumps up with both hands wide open and grabs. He knew that that was his chance to become a journalist in a very formal sense, and he grabbed it with both arms. And that article, I think that article is actually even printed in Philosophies and Opinions. But certainly Garvey talks about that opportunity in Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. So again, we must remember that Garvey hasn't got a lot of money. And so he's always looking for places to stay. Now, Dost Muhammad Ali, his mentor, lives in Brixton, of all places. Yeah? In fact, he lives in 55 Victoria Mansions, which is on South Lambeth Road. So Garvey, at one point, lives with his mentor. His mentor gives him a couch. Yeah? So he lives on the South Lambeth Road. For us who are in London, these places that I'm mentioning are familiar. We know these places. So Garvey lives in the very communities that we live in today very often. And even if we don't live in them, we know those communities well. Now, if Garvey thought that Britain was free from racism, he soon disabused of that when immigration come with police and arrest his mentor. So they arrest his mentor, they take his mentor to Brixton police station, and immigration wants to deport his mentor. They're questioning his right to stay here in Britain. So this was in 1913, this is 107 years ago. And we still have this problem today, where immigration come with police and arrest African, and not just African people, but any non-British person who does not have white skin. They come, they arrest them, they make some excuse, they take them to a place called Yarwood, and they've closed it down now, as I understand it, or they've made the decision to close it down now. And just basically harass African and other people who do not have white skin, just for being present here in Britain. So Garvey experiences this firsthand through his mentor. His mentor was able to argue his case, however, and was not deported. 1912, I come back to it again, is typified by the hardships that Garvey went through. And so towards the end of his stay in Britain, things get very hard, but his sister, Indiana, is also in England. She comes to England as a domestic helper. And so she's looking after the children and the household of a middle class, a wealthy, upper middle class family here in London. Now, that family lives in Stamford Hill, which is still a middle class area even today. So Garvey, during the hard times, ends up going and coaching with his sister, yeah, in Stamford Hill. The address there is number 14 Durley Road. So he lives, you know, just between kind of Stoke Newington and Tottenham, two areas where you'll find a whole heap of African people, you know, to this very day. So he's actually living in the areas that we ourselves are familiar with. Now, as I said, at the center of Garvey's reasons for being in Britain was to study, to learn more, to, you know, develop. It's that it was personal development, but not for personal reasons. And so he stays here until 1914. So he arrives in 1912. He's doing all kinds of work. He's studying throughout. And in 1914, he leaves here. Actually, on the 17th of June, you remember I was saying I was looking at the records. I could actually get the date. So he leaves England on the 17th of June. But he doesn't have enough money to buy a ticket. So he has to go to the colonial office and basically beg them to give him some money so that he can get a boat to go back to Jamaica. And they have a fund to assist him. Yeah, so glad to get rid of Africans that they created a fund to actually get rid of Africans who are here. So they actually assisted him and he went back. But the fact that he left England on the 17th of June is instructive, because it implies that is kind of exam period. And it implies that straight after he had finished his exams, he was on the next boat to get out of Britain to make his way back to his home, the island of Jamaica, or I should say his place of birth. There might be a dispute about whether that's actually home as such. We may say that Africa was home, but certainly his place of birth was, the island of Jamaica. So he returns. He lands in Jamaica on the 15th of July, 1914. All of this is very significant because what's happening is there is a build-up to a world war happening. Within weeks of his return to Jamaica, something like 6 weeks after, did I say 6 weeks? No, within about 2 or 3 weeks after of his return to Jamaica, you have the outbreak of World War. I say 2 or 3 weeks. No, 6 weeks is about right. The beginning of September is when the World War actually broke out. So part of his motivation was to finish his course at Birkbeck. But another part of his motivation for getting out of England very quickly was to get out of this place before the World War started, because by then tensions would have been rising and people would have had a sense of the possibility of war. Even if they didn't think it was going to happen, they would have a sense of the possibility. And so it would not make sense for somebody like Garvey to be, in this foreign land at a time when they are thinking about warring with their cousins over in Germany. So we can kind of make an assessment of some of his reasons for you know, leaving at that time, leaving pretty sharpish at that time. Now, I think that's what I'll say about 1912 to 1914. You know, people may have questions, and I'm happy to work with those questions. But I'll move on now to his second stay, which is 1928. But in order to understand his 1928 visit and his reasons for being here, we perhaps just need to look a little at what was going on in England at the time. So in 1924, Garvey appoints Richard Torbit to be the UNIA representative here in Britain. Now you might ask, why would he even bother to set up a branch in Britain where there are hardly any African people? Well, there were developments in Britain which Garvey was keeping an eye on. And one of those developments was that in 1924, the Labour Party won their first ever general election. Now, the Labour Party had been going since the early 1900s. I can't remember the exact date of the origin of the Labour Party. It's something like 1908, but it's in the first decade in the 1900s. And so a Labour movement had built up. It had turned into a party in the early 1900s. And in 1924, it won its first general election. Now, we've got to understand that the Labour Party that existed then was a very different beast to the beast that exists now. And at the time, it would have appeared to have been a real breakthrough. And in fact, in terms of the politics of the working class here in Britain, it was a major breakthrough. It broke the stranglehold of the Tories and the Whigs, or the Tories and the Liberals. Before that, those two parties dominated British politics. And then the Labour Party wins its first election in 1924, and it is a massive changing of the landscape. And Garvey sees hope in some kind of working relationship with the European working class here. He saw no hope of a working relationship with the European working class in US Satan, where the Ku Klux Klan was very obvious, and the wickedness and lynchings and all the things that they did to us were very obvious. But in Britain, because these lynchings and things were not as commonplace, they did happen now, yeah? Let's be under no illusions. They did happen, and there are examples, and if people want me to talk about those examples afterwards, I'll talk about those examples. But they were not numerous in the way that they were in US Satan. So Garvey saw some hope for developing some kind of relationship with them, and the Labour Party was the vehicle to develop that relationship. So they set up a UNIA chapter in here, and the UNIA chapter becomes a very strong chapter, a very strong chapter. Typically, the UNIA, when it buys a building, it calls the building Liberty Hall. But in England, when they bought their building, they didn't call it Liberty Hall. They called it Marcus Garvey Hall. So there was a building in East London called Marcus Garvey Hall in the 1920s. It's mind-boggling to think that so few African people living there at the time were able to galvanize and organize themselves to purchase a building, to name it the Marcus Garvey building, and they did this in the mid-1920s. successfully. And we may or may not know that history, but whether we know the history or not, we're doing the same thing now. Africans are galvanizing to purchase a building which they intend to call the Marcus Garvey Village or the Garvey Village. So sometimes we may know it or we may not know it, but we are repeating the history of our ancestors. So Garvey Village operates in the tradition of genuine Garveyites that have been here in Britain since the 1920s. And it's important to understand that history and the connection with Garvey Village. Now, what happened at that time is you had African men here in Britain. A nation tends not to send its women to foreign lands. If it's going to take the chance with the lives of any of its people, it sends its sons to go and investigate. And so what you had was a situation in the 1920s where you had, a number of African young men here in Britain. And some of them grouped together to form the UNIA chapter here in Britain. But you did not have an equivalent number of African young women here in Britain. And so what happened is these young men ended up marrying European women. And this led to an extraordinary state of affairs. Because Garvey comes to Britain with his wife, Amy Jakes Garvey, his second wife, Amy Jakes Garvey. He comes to Britain, they come to Britain, and they are hosted by the UNA chapter here in London. And these African men are married to European women. The organization, the UNIA, is an African organization. Its membership is African people, but these African men are married to European women. So there's a, what do we do with this? And what the Garveys do with this is extraordinary. They make an assessment of these European women, and their assessment is that these European women are genuinely committed to the cause of their husbands. And so they create an auxiliary to the UNIA here in London, which is exclusively European women. Now notice I said it's an auxiliary. It's not a branch of the UNIA, it's an auxiliary to the UNIA. And so these European women, their job is to, in addition to serving their husbands, is to serve the UNIA. It's a kind of arm's length service of the UNIA. And although it's not explicitly expressed, the role, and this is my interpretation of the history that I've read, so there are some things that are just facts, I'm telling you are just facts, but some things, when they're interpretation, you must state that they're interpretation. My interpretation of it is that he turned those women into an underground movement. And the job of those European women was to go and spy on the Europeans and to bring that information back to the UNIA. And then the UNIA would use that information to help it to plan its way forward. So, when these Europeans turned up at meetings of their European friends, not friends, but European organizations, nobody knows that they're married to an African. So they go there, and they sit down, they take notes or whatever it is that they do, and then they bring that information back to the UNIA. And it's my assertion that Garvey built a spy network here in Britain using those women as the spies. Now that is not stated explicitly in the history, but that's the construction that I've put on it based on what I've read. So it's extraordinary. Now, to understand what that means, it means many things, and people may want to discuss that, but it means many different things. But an auxiliary to the UNIA, the Black Star shipping line, was an auxiliary to the UNIA. The businesses that Garvey and the UNIA created were auxiliaries. The Black Cross nurses were auxiliaries. The African Legion were auxiliaries. All of these were auxiliary organizations to the UNIA. In those cases, the auxiliary, even the Negro World, the newspaper, was an auxiliary to the UNIA. So you could be a member of the UNIA and a member of the auxiliary. You could be a member, so you could be a member of the auxiliary, but not a member of the UNIA. So it was possible for you to be serving the UNIA without being a member. And as far as I can detect, these women were serving the interests of the UNIA through their husbands, through the auxiliaries, without actually themselves being physical card-carrying members of the UNIA. But what it does show is that Garvey was a strategist, a tactician, and he understood that in war, you must have spies. Yeah, that's if my assertion is correct. And it shows that Garvey was not trapped by narrow interpretations of politics. He actually knew how to organize tactically to win battles and to win wars. So Garvey, whilst he's here in 1928 now, creates this auxiliary of European women, which is extraordinary in terms of the history of Garvey. But he uses Britain, every time he comes to Britain, by the way, he uses Britain as a base from which to go over to other parts of Europe. So when he was here in 1912, 1914, for instance, he does a European tour, which includes Scotland, for instance. Yeah. In 1928, he does another European tour because he wants to go to Geneva. In Geneva, he speaks to the League of Nations. Now, just to explain, nowadays, we have an organization called the United Nations. In those days, it was called the League of Nations. So the League of Nations was abolished, and then the United Nations took over in 1948. So Garvey comes to petition the League of Nations in 1928. So he's coming here, and people don't necessarily realize this, but if you take time to read the speeches of Garvey, Garvey comes here and he speaks about reparations. Yeah, he makes.
I'm just want to say it's 5 to 10.
Yeah.
Yes. You'll be back because there's so much more to tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay. So let me conclude 1928.
Thank you.
Yeah? And then I'll do the other two visits next time. Yeah.
Okay.
1928 is almost concluded anyway. But let me just say this. Let me just say this, that Garvey in 1928 also makes a presentation in the Albert Hall, that place on the south side of Hyde Park, built by Victoria for her husband, as they tell their history. And here he's speaking to Europeans. You've got to understand that he's speaking to Europeans. I should also mention he's also doing Speaker's Corner as well. And he says this, and I'm doing a quote, and the quote that I'm doing It's from a booklet that I wrote some years ago. I don't know if you can see that, but it was 100 Years of Marcus Garvey in the UK, 1912 to 2012. And in the Albert Hall, he says this, if I can find the right one. He says, I am here this evening as President General of the UNIA, an organization of 11 million, I say African people, he didn't use that term, 11 million African people in Africa, US Satan, South America, Central America, Canada, the West Indies, to present to you the claim of our race upon your civilization. The significance of that quote is Garvey was dealing with reparations in 1928 before we had the term reparations. When Garvey went to Geneva, he was going there on a reparations quest. When Garvey went to the Royal Albert Hall, he went there on a reparations quest. So we think, some of us, that reparations is something new. We think that we started something new, some of us. But Garvey was there long before us. Now, I'm going to stop there. I'm sorry if I've extended and gone too far, and I will say a little something on the 1931 and 1935 to 40 periods the next time round, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. He barely started speaking. Barely hear any word. We'd love to hear him talk some more.
And he will be back. He will be back.
He'll be back the second week of next month. The date has escaped me, but it'd be Omowale has got a regular spot the second Friday of each month. So if you'd like to take a note of that.
So that'll be the 10th of October.
Can I just say thank you for your very kind...
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that very kind comment.
It's really fantastic, the work, the effort, the contribution that you have made to educate us about us and our history, and just give thanks for you, brother. One love.
Thank you, my brother. And remember, you are doing now what Garvey were doing in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to understand that connection. You're holding a baton, and it's a very, very important baton. Very important baton.
So thank you. So we don't really have time for questions now.
That's fine.
But you know, when we come back on the 10th, what we'll do is give you an even longer platform. We'll have an earlier pause so that you can get a barrage of questions, because I'm sure there are many.
Okay, thank you very much.
And it's just fantastic just hearing you. And like the sister said, I can hear you all day long. But let's honor ourselves and the time, and give thanks.
Be disciplined. Yeah, we must be.
Thank you, Omowale. Thank you very much, Omowale. I love one of my favorite things at school was doing 400-meter relay. So I love taking the baton. I love handing it on as
well. Well done, sis.
Give thanks.
Thank you so much, Brother Omowale, and looking forward to the 10th of October. You come back.
Yes, indeed.
And yes, looking forward.
It was fantastic. It was informative.
Thank you, Brian.
Right.
Okay. Big thank you to our brother Toyin Agbetu, I hope I pronounced that right, for explaining what Pan-Africanism is. I need to put my teeth in. Big thank you also to Sister Ella Yemi for her explanation of the benefits of Reiki. And again, thank you very much, Omowale, for your presentation. The more we hear about Marcus Garvey, is the wiser we are to the man and the great wealth of, as I said, fields that he actually touched on. You know,
indeed.
We're just scratching the surface. I mean, you know,
we
have got a lot to learn, and there's a big shoes for us to fill. But as long as we start one step at a time, we can help get that way. And the more we get teachings like from you, you know, we can move on, we can move forward, and hope, trust that Garvey will be proud of us.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Can I just add, in terms of Omowale's, as you probably know, has also written several books, and there's one, Pan-Africanism, from program to philosophy. But I think there's three different copies of this that you've written. Is that so, Omowale?
Yeah, the book that you have in your hand is very important for anybody who wants to understand Garvey. There's a chapter in there on Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. And what it does is it looks at Garvey from a strategic point of view. It looks at the vision of Garvey and explains the strategy of Garvey. Now, what historians have done is they have presented the facts of Garvey, which is what they should do. Yeah, but it takes activists to make the interpretation and to put it into strategic form.
Okay.
So there aren't other books that do that at this stage. But that book, if you want.
Thank you, Brother Omowale. No more questions tonight. Thank you all for your attendance. Come back on the 10th. We can ask him more questions. We will create a bigger platform for questions then. So write it down, but make a note in your diary, and we will hear you then. Just to say that in chat, Brother Toyin did put his list of books there. So if you haven't done so already, you go and find it in there and download it before we shut down, if you want it. All right?
Also, you can save the chat as well. If you want any information from any of the presenters, you can save the chat.
All right.
And don't forget the event on Sunday, the 13th, for Delroy Washington. Lots of drumming, singing, dancing.
You got to stay where, my dear? Where?
Omowale, please just remind us. Homewood Road in Harlesden.
Roundwood Park.
Oh, sorry.
On the Harlesden Road, Roundwood Park.
Okay.
It's going to be a very powerful occasion.
From what time?
Starting at
3 o'clock until 8.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. And thank you for sharing the time with us, and hope that you've got out of it as much as I have got out of it. Give thanks for everybody. I hope you've saved your chat, and we look forward to seeing you next week, Friday. Same time, same place.
Good night. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very, very, very much.
And love.
You're welcome.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night. I just wanted to say, Sister Auntie Jean, Brother Royston, and Sister Patricia, there's no shoes to fill. You just fill your own.
Okay.
You're doing a great work and continue. You are not Marcus Garvey. Nobody here is Marcus Garvey.
Right.
You have
I know.
You do the work.
That wasn't what I meant, but I mean,
no, it's cool.
Follow his footsteps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All
Peace
right.
and love. Much appreciated. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Peace.
Peace and love.
Peace and love, my sis.
Thank you, Auntie. Thank you, Royston.
Good night, Sister Ya.
Good night.
Good night, family.
Nice to see you.
Okay.
Oh, let me save the chat. I want to save the chat myself and tell everybody else to save the chat, and I didn't even save it.
Quick before I press close.
Okay.
How do we save the chat?
The 3 dots at the side where it says file.
File?
Yeah,
click
so
on
you
chat.
know, you click on the chat, over to the far right-hand side of the chat at the bottom. It's got 3 dots. Click on it, it comes up, and the top one should say save chat.
Wow. Is it?
Got it?
I can't find it. Oh, I don't know. You're going to have to send the recording, I guess. I can post, I don't know.
Okay.
All right.
Yemi?
I'll forward it to
Yemi?
you.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yemi, listen. Can you click on chat?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Click on chat.
At the bottom of the page, On the right-hand side, it says file.
She's using a phone.
I've got Android.
Okay. Are you on the phone or are you on a computer?
On an Android, it's like a tablet.
Right, so you should still be able to see, can you see chat?
Yeah, I see the chat.
Right, so if you click on chat,
yeah,
it will then tell me what you see at the bottom of chat.
It's sent to everyone. It doesn't say nothing else. It just says...
Eric, can you see 3 dots there?
No.
If you move your cursor onto the bottom right-hand corner, does it bring up 3 dots?
No.
Okay. I'll tell you what you do. You put your email in, chat.
It's there. I put her email in earlier.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we can communicate that to you. All right?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sister Yemi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Good night, all.
Good night.
Go in once, go in twice, go in 3 times. Bye.
Yeah.